I've played around with Luminar a few times in the past, but it never really clicked with me until just now. I figured out the mindset shift that you need to make with Luminar. But when you do, it can be a very powerful way to edit your photos, take advantage of some fantastic AI technology, and just be more effective at creating great images as a photographer. So let's talk about that mindset shift and how to find success with Luminar. Hey there, Aaron here from techphotoguy.com, and as I said, I found a way to make Luminar stick with my mindset, and I think you're going to have some fun with this too. So just quick disclaimer up front, Skyloom, the company behind Luminar, they reached out to me, they gave me a license to the software to try it out. They didn't tell me what I needed to do with it. They didn't tell me anything I needed to say about it, and they have no idea what I'm saying on this video until it releases. So I am a partner with them. There's a link down below that if you want to check it out, you can get 10% off using a promo code that I've got down there. But even if you don't, I think you're going to find this really interesting and a new way of thinking about editing your photos. So let's dive into Luminar. I'm going to show you my screen here, get my face down in the corner and out of the way. So I'm going to show 3 different images and some fun things you can do with Luminar to those types of images. And they're all a little bit different, but I think it shows off well this mindset shift. And I think this mindset is best summarized as edit first, mask questions later. Well, I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. But if you come from the Adobe world of photo editing, you've probably had a lot of hassles with masking in the past, and Luminar just gives you a different way to look at that. So let's take a look at this image we've got right here. We've got a fun hot air balloon scene. This was actually shot from a different hot air balloon at an event several years ago. And as you can see, this scene is fairly kind of drab and dull. It's, other than the bright yellow, it doesn't have a lot of pop to it. So I'm going to switch over to the edit module, and all my tools are down the right-hand side. For this one, I think this is going to be one where the first thing I'm going to want to do is go over here under Enhance. They've got something called Accent AI, which really just kind of is some secret sauce to give an image a lot of oomph. I'm just going to go ahead and apply a lot of that to that photo, give it a moment to process, and what you'll see is that it increased my exposure overall. I think it made some kind of texture adjustments throughout. I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think I want to tweak that too much further. But, while I love how the balloon pops here, there's, this background, there's lots of textures and stuff back there that, I don't know really add a lot to the photo. In fact, I'd maybe like to de-emphasize them a little bit. There's also back here kind of in the middle, something kind of orange or red right in that clump of trees, probably some piece of farm equipment or something like that. Now, there's a few different ways you can take care of this. I'm going to just use the erase tool. So over here, I'm going to go under erase. You note that there's a couple interesting things that can automatically remove power lines or dust spots. The power lines aren't really a big deal in this photo, but I've had some where it is. But I'm just going to use the basic erase tool. I'm going to change the size of my erase brush, and I'm just going to, paint right over that little orange thing that you've got going on there. And then I'm going to say erase. It's going to apply some magic, take it out. Got rid of it. I'm going to leave this white truck that's here at the edge of this field because I think it adds to the farm scene. I don't find it particularly distracting like I did that orange item. But let's go back and talk about just kind of the overall feel. I would love to give this maybe a softer take everywhere other than the balloon. So there's a few ways to do this, but I'm going to go down here to the mystical tool, which is one of the creative tools we have here in Luminar. And I'm just going to apply a whole bunch of mysticalness to this image. And I can adjust more or less here with the amount slider. I can crank it all the way up to 100 if I want to take it to the extreme. I think that's maybe a little bit too much. Everything seems so soft. Maybe I'll back that off here to I'm at 65. Now, I like how that's kind of softened the feel of the background and the fields here in this image, but I really wish that balloon had a little bit of pop to it. So I don't want that effect to apply on the balloon. Now, in the Photoshop world, we'd be talking about either applying an adjustment layer, dealing with a layer mask, things like that. With Luminar, you have masking built in to these tools directly. It's not a separate panel. You just click on masking, and then there's a few different ways that you can do it. I'm going to just use a brush And I'm going to say erase because I want to erase the mystical effect from this balloon. And it gives me a big brush here. By default, I'm just going to hit this. You'll see it gives me an overlay to let me know what I'm working with. I'm going to do this quickly here. I'm going to shrink my brush size down just a little bit, give me a little bit finer grain control here, mask out more of this balloon. Now what you might see is, oh, whoops, I masked too much. I accidentally applied it to the field as well. Well, you can see that looks kind of funny. I've got a little bit of a glow like look almost here next to this balloon because I did too much. But the good news is these are all adjustable. So I can go back here to my masking. I can say paint because I want to reapply it to an area. And then I can click and I can paint that effect back in to this area where I hadn't previously wanted it. So now we've got this balloon very quickly masked out. Not bad. Okay, so that's one type of photo where we can edit first and deal with mask questions later. Let's go back to the catalog, look at something entirely different. So let's look at a portrait here. I took a selfie of myself. That's kind of redundant. I took a selfie at Imaging USA this year in Nashville. I'm standing inside the Gaylord Opryland, and the photo is not too bad, but I don't like how busy it is in the background. There's a lot of detail back here that distracts from our lovely model that we have here that we're working with. So I'm going to go over to edit, and I'm going to do a couple different things. So one thing that I want to do, I want to de-emphasize a lot of this detail in the background. And the easiest way to do that is go over here to the Portrait Bokeh tool. I'm going to open that up, and what it's going to do when I apply it is it's going to detect the person in the portrait, and it's going to apply a bokeh effect to everything else. And so I'm a big fan with photo tools to take them to the extreme and then ease it back until it's realistic. So I'm going to say, go ahead and give this 100, full effect. And Luminar is analyzing the image right now, and then it applies that effect. Now, what it has done is it has automatically figured out the person in the image, it's applied a mask automatically, and then it's applied the bokeh effect everywhere else. And it's done a pretty darn good job. If I hover over it with my tool, you can see the color overlay on that mask that it's applied. And I want to call attention to a couple things. One is, if you look at my hair up at the top of my head, I've got kind of that spike. I've got some hairs poking out there. And it's doing just fine handling that. It handled my glasses okay. You'll see that it did not apply the blur on the lenses. So it's a fairly darn smart tool. Now that is a lot of bokeh. I might want to ease that off just a little bit. I'm going to crank it back maybe to like 68, so it's not quite as extreme. Now, while we did a good job of blurring the details in the background, there's another set of details that I want to blur here, and that's on my face, because it seems I forgot to do my makeup this day. We'll go with that. It's not just that I have facial issues. I can go down to the Face AI tool, and there's a few different things that it can do. One is that, I'm not a skinny guy. I would love to maybe just slim my face up just a little bit. Now, you can do this manually with a variety of other photo editing tools, but instead, Luminar has this slim face tool that will detect the face and slim it just a little bit. Now, again, if I take this all the way to 100, it's going to make some adjustments here once it identifies my face and shrinks it down. So if I turn this off, you'll see the original photo and the slimmed face with Luminar. Now that's maybe a little bit too slim. Let's take it back to 50%, where I think that still looks good, still looks reasonable. Turn it off. This is the original image and my slightly slimmed face. Let's talk about the skin. What if we go to the Skin AI tool here with Luminar? Again, we're going to edit first and not have to worry about the masking unless there's an issue until later. So it can do a couple different things. We don't have a lot of shine in this image because I'm inside. It's under a kind of a sunroof type thing or a diffused atrium environment. But I would love to maybe just smooth out that skin a little bit. Now, if I take it all the way to 100, you'll see that it really smooths out my skin. Probably a little bit more than is realistic because, hey, I am not a baby. I don't have skin that's quite as smooth as a baby. But let me take that back down here to about 50, 51, which is a good deal. Now, it also has an AI-powered skin defect removal. You'll see I've got a couple little bumps and blemishes here on my forehead. If I turn that on, Luminar will take those off. Pretty cool. So let's look at the original photo as I imported it. This is what the original was, and this is the finished image. Pretty nice. The original, the finished image. And we did that all in just a couple minutes. All right, let's look at one more image where I want to show how we can edit first and mask questions later. Here we are in the interior of the Venetian Hotel in Las Vegas. Kind of a cool scene. Got the columns, nice little perspective leading us down through the image. Fantastic ceiling, but you'll also see that this image here out of the camera, it's fairly muted, fairly dull, fairly drab. I would love to make it pop. I would love to bring out some of that detail in that ceiling, but not necessarily accentuate some of these other areas down below or to the sides that aren't quite as exciting. So I'm going to go to my edit. And once again, I'm going to start with Enhance AI because that's kind of my favorite make it look good tool. I'm going to give it a whole bunch of that. Let's see what it does. Give it a second to really apply it. And you know, that's pretty good. I like what it did with the exposure throughout the scene. It retained the detail in these highlight areas, but I would love to make this ceiling pop a little bit more. So I'm going to go down here to Structure AI and I'm going to crank it up to 100. Wow. Okay. It made that ceiling very crunchy, a lot of pop going on there, maybe a little bit too much. Let's tweak the amount. I don't know. I kind of like it right about there. I feel like it's really given me a lot of good detail on this ceiling, but it hasn't taken it too over the top. That said, I don't really like that it's given me all these crunchy details down in the two lower bottom kind of corners of the images, and I would love to back that off. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to masking. I'm going to say brush, I'm going to choose erase, and I want to erase the structure from these lower areas. So if I zoom in and give us a better feel for this here, I'm going to erase the structure tool. And again, you get this overlay mask that can tell you what you're working with, but I'm erasing the structure tool as it's applied kind of down here underneath these columns in these areas where I don't really want to apply or highlight the details quite so much. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's a little bit better. They're a little bit softer. I want to do the same kind of thing over here. I'm going to zoom into this other corner. And again, I'm going to erase that structure that I'd applied down in this corner and give it a little bit of a softer feel to it. All right, so we're back to the original image. Now again, let's pop back to straight out of the camera. And after our edits, I'm pretty happy with this. I might play around with the crop, might tweak the perspective a little bit, but as you can see, what I really appreciate about Luminar is that it lets you make your edits and then deal with masking after the fact. With Photoshop, you've got to think about it up front. Sometimes you create the masks up front. Sometimes you'll create a layer mask or an adjustment layer with the mask built in. And I know that's a barrier for a lot of people when they kind of get beyond the basics in Photoshop. And Luminar, by having the masking options built into each tool, it takes care of all of that automatically. And so you can edit first and deal with mask questions later. The other thing I will point out is that in Luminar, here I'll pop back over to it real quick, I can go to the edits up here in the upper right. And what it does is this is kind of like a history palette. It's the history of the edits that you've made. And you can go back and you can change these later. So if I decided, for example, that no, I didn't like that really crunchy look, I wanted to lower the amount of that structure that we applied, I can change that. Off, on. Or if I really wanted to take it to the extreme, maybe I decide I want to take it to 100. I can go back and change that later. And as I make additional changes, they would show up here in this edit history. So overall, love the way that Luminar makes it easy to go in and apply either global or selective edits by letting you edit first, deal with mask questions later. If you want to check out Luminar, there's a link down below in the description to let you do that. There's a promo code down there that'll save you 10% off your Luminar subscription. And drop a comment below. I would love to know if you've played with Luminar. I'd love to know what you think about this kind of fresh approach to editing. It's not the same way that you would do it in Photoshop, but I think it's a lot more intuitive, and it lets you really get into the creative aspects of your photography quicker without having to become a masking and layers guru in order to do so. So drop me a comment below. I would love to know what you think, and stick around on this channel, subscribe. I'll be back at you again soon with another tech photo topic. Take care.